how could the Brewers move? Guess what? We've got a money situation. Let me give you the background. When Miller Park was built, people may not remember how hard it was to get this done. Bud Selig was able to cut a deal. He was the owner of the Brewers before he was commissioner. Even during commissionership, he was the owner of the Brewers, but they called him the interim commissioner in order to make it okay that he also owned a team. Eventually, when he was named the actual commissioner, which he already had been the actual commissioner, he had to sell the team to Mark Annunzio. But Miller Park was built when there was a brand new tax levied upon not just the people in Milwaukee, but in 5 counties surrounding Milwaukee County. And that tax revenue from a brand new tax was used to fund Miller Park. Let's just call it to fund Miller Park, if you don't mind. It passed. It was difficult. There was a fight. Somehow Bud Selig ended up not becoming unpopular. Somehow the team president did not become unpopular. Somehow they found a way to realize that having the Brewers in Milwaukee made a whole hell of a lot of sense. What they didn't find a way to do was figure out how to fund capital repairs when the Capital Reserve Fund could no longer fund capital repairs. Does that sound familiar? That's the Marlins deal I cut. We said we have a 38-year lease. We'll figure out how to fund the first 10 years. But after that, hey, we'll figure it out when it happens. There's been silence in Miami as to what's happened because Marlins Park is more than 10 years old. But the reason why you kick the can on that issue is because the team does not want to agree to fund repairs going forward, and the county, the public, does not want to agree to fund repairs going forward because there's no revenue stream in the current day to fund that future obligation. And the team doesn't want to have that future obligation on its ledger because it quashes the value of the team and it hurts the cash flow of the team. So what do you do to get a stadium deal done? You ignore it and you worry about it when the time comes. In Arizona, the time came a year ago where Arizona, the Diamondbacks said, hey, if you guys don't build us a new stadium, then you better come up with a way to give us $1 billion to fix this Chase Field because it's no longer state-of-the-art, no longer good enough. And we don't know where it's going to come from, but we're not doing it. We may move like the Coyotes, but we're not funding renovations to this field. And now in Milwaukee, we're hearing the same thing. The Brewers are saying we are not going to fund renovations. The Democratic governor had a deal in place. They were going to finance $448 million in long-term renovations, making sure the Brewers stay in Milwaukee, and the Republicans in the state legislature and locally have said, no merci, we ain't going to do it. So guess what happens? In comes Commissioner Rob Manfred. Hello, Rob. Welcome to Milwaukee. The last place in the world Rob Manfred wants to go is Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It gives him flashbacks to having to go to Milwaukee all the time to meet with his former boss, Bud Selig. He doesn't want to be anywhere near it. But guess what? There's a problem. Public money is needed. And when public money is needed, one of the jobs of the commissioner, the way to make a lot of money when you're commissioner, you ask for it, Rob, you've got the job. Sometimes you got to go to places you don't want to go. Is it a coincidence that Rob Manfred was in Milwaukee talking to Brewers players as part of his I want players to like me after the lockout, so I'm going to go visit them during the course of the season? You think when they put his schedule together that they chose this week to go to Milwaukee out of nowhere because he was available pre-Memorial Day and after that he wants to be golfing? Absolutely not. There are votes going on right now. There are meetings going on right now in Milwaukee and in Wisconsin to figure out whether or not this money is going to be funded publicly. So Rob Manfred comes in under cover of meeting with players, which is total horse hockey. He was there to make a quote that was pre-written about Milwaukee and about the stadium, and he did not disappoint. He made it very clear that he wants the Brewers to stay in Milwaukee. He made it very clear that he does not want Miller Park to become like the Oakland A's Coliseum, where it's ignored and it goes from being a first-class facility to a steerage facility. He acknowledged that the Oakland Coliseum was never as first class as Miller Park because you cannot acknowledge that a non-new stadium, a non-baseball only stadium, can ever be first class. You have to be baseball only to get that designation, and that's what Miller Park is. So he said to all of you to here in Wisconsin, we have a first-class building here. If you don't maintain it as a first-class building, you are at risk of losing your first-class status. And then you're in risk of the team moving. Everybody's up in arms. Let me help you on a random Friday and tell you the Milwaukee Brewers are not leaving Milwaukee under any scenario. The Milwaukee Brewers are not going to threaten relocation the way they did in Seattle, which is how they got to Milwaukee back in 1969. The Brewers are going to stay at Miller Park. The public financing deal is going to happen. Renovations will be a deal that is cut between the Brewers and the state and the Brewers and the county. No matter how many people you hear, including some of the same legislators who were involved in the original deal, who are now saying what we were promised is not being kept. We were told that this original tax, once it ended because we paid back what we needed to pay back, that was it. We wouldn't burden our taxpayers again. I'm never voting for this. Guess what? They likely don't need your vote. There will be a vote. There will be an allocation that will be acceptable by the Brewers, acceptable by Major League Baseball, and acceptable by the people of Wisconsin and Milwaukee. Why? Because there's nowhere for the Brewers to go. Major League Baseball cannot keep having relocation candidates when they're trying to do expansion. Because the only way to expand is to have multiple cities ready to take on an expansion team. And if those cities are being considered for relocation, they'd prefer that to expansion. The Brewers deal will get done. Don't worry. What about the A's deal? Rob Manfred in Milwaukee had an opportunity to really talk about Oakland. And he said something that is page 7 of the Let's Get a Deal Done in Oakland playbook. He said a relocation vote could happen at the next owners' meetings. Today is May 26th. The next owners' meetings are in June. Coco, what's the date? June 13th to June 15th? Is that possible? Is it that soon? I can't remember when the next thing is. Let's pretend it's June 25th, which would make it 30 days from today. Here's what has to happen in 30 days. The Las Vegas legislature has to have a bill put in front of it, a specific bill about public financing for an A's ballpark in Vegas. Then it has to be argued on the floor, then brought to a vote, then passed. Then signed, then there has to be a final deal cut between Vegas and the A's. A financing deal. Who's building what? Who's responsible for what? A fully baked deal for a new stadium in Oakland. Damn it, a fully baked deal for a new stadium in Vegas. Then Oakland has to apply to Major League Baseball for relocation. Then there's a committee of people within baseball who will look at the entire package. The entire package is not just a completed finance deal for a stadium, a local TV deal, a pro forma projection. What will the team be like for the first 1, 3, and 5 years in Vegas? What are the revenue sharing implications for the new team? What is the expense? What is the revenue? What is the benefit? All of that has to be prepared, looked at. Then there's a recommendation made by a committee within Major League Baseball. Then you have to have it voted on by the full owners. That cannot happen in 30 days under any scenario. Forget the fact that 3 of the days are Memorial Day weekend. Forget the fact that it's summertime where things go a little slower to begin with. I understand Rob's quotes. I really do. It's possible that a relocation vote could happen as early as June, Manfred said. He wants the pressure to be felt by both Vegas and Oakland. He had to acknowledge that it's very difficult to have a timeline for Oakland until there's actually a deal. He buried the lead thinking that we weren't going to pay attention. You can't vote on relocation until there's a deal, and not just a deal for financing. But then Rob Manfred said something else. Do you think he was saying it for you to hear or for me to hear? Nope. He was saying it for Oakland to hear. When asked whether it was possible that the A's could stay in Oakland, he said, I think you'd have to ask the mayor of Oakland that. She said she had cut off negotiations after an announcement was made in Vegas. I don't have a crystal ball as to where anything's going. There's not a definitive deal done in Vegas. We'll have to see how that plays out. I think everybody's watching Nothing Personal. That's my takeaway. Because I've been saying the same thing for years now. The most likely scenario is a last-minute deal to keep the team in Oakland. This Vegas deal is not close. And what's so bad about this situation is that for expansion, baseball's getting a sneak peek as to the difficulty in getting stadium deals financed anywhere. And expansion can only happen with public financing for a stadium in the city where there's going to be expansion. And baseball doesn't want Vegas to be off the list for expansion. The best way to not get turned down by the state legislature in Vegas is to not have a bill for them to consider. And the best way to have them not have a bill to consider is to have a deal done in Oakland, where the reported gap between the A's and the city of Oakland was smaller than what the A's have given up in Vegas from what their original deal was to what their current deal may be. Think about it. It makes no sense. Or dollars.